It is the Anfield Wrap. It's Neil Atkinson with Siobhan Biggane, Emilia, Bona and Stu Wright in the aftermath of Watford 0, Liverpool 2, or the other way around actually, if we're honest about it. But I'd said Watford then, I had to commit. Hopefully we will also have time to talk about Mo Salah, and we will have time to talk about Benfica, which is on the way. Loads of reaction to Watford and looking ahead to Benfica, and then ultimately the same thing that you're interested in as well, which is Manchester City, all to come on the Anfield Wrap this week. Download the app, use the tokens, enjoy everything that is there. But we will start off with Liverpool 2, Watford 0, and I'll look at the three of you around the table and I'll ask you this, be honest, did anyone know what the VAR was for?
Nope.
It was a good 3 minutes in before I realised it was genuine. Like there was something was going to happen.
As soon as it went, I went, this is... Because it was 90 seconds before it could have been anything. Yeah. And I thought, this is getting given. As soon as the thing came up on the screen in Anfield, I thought, this is getting given. Because I've got no idea what's gone on. So therefore, it's going to be one that is going to get given. But you had no idea? You had no idea?
No, did anyone else for a fleeting moment think, hang on, have they been in our box in the last few minutes? Because I did.
Yeah. I had a moment of thinking that. I had a moment of, has there been a bad tackle that I've just missed? I thought it was handball. From a Firmino block.
There were a few that were called for that didn't kind of materialise into anything. I watched it on the telly, so I had an unfair advantage in terms of someone was telling me what it was while it was happening.
But did they know what it was then?
Yeah,
Oh no! So
I was watching it back, having listened to it on the radio, so it was almost that hindsight thing of like, there's going to be the VAR decision in a minute, but
never again. By the way, this watching it on the telly thing because
don't believe in it.
First and foremost, the baby was there and he's pain. Secondly. You're so it's audible because you're so much more nervous when it's in a way, you know, there's certain games there's nothing you can do about, but I actively chose not to go and I was sitting there a bag of nerves unnecessarily for so long, but it took them a good while. And then when they bring in Peter Walton and they go, Peter, what do you think? And he's like, well, you've put me in a situation here because I can't agree with the on-field decision because it hasn't been made yet, so you know, blah blah blah. It was only then that it become apparent what it was about.
It wasn't clear at all on the ground, was it, Stu? It really wasn't. There was just this long pause. I loved all the players. I loved Robertson basically going to the cut of Robertson going to the referee. What's going on here? And the referee was like, don't know, mate, to be honest with you. But it was a penalty in that it is so bang on. It is ridiculous.
Yeah, he rugby tackled him.
Yeah,
and the only reason none of the players made a shout for it was because it was at the back post and no one else knew about it apart from Jota. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it was completely out of the eye line of everyone. I think you know, there is an argument to say, well, the ball wasn't coming anywhere near him. But
I think he was trying to run that way.
If he's free, then he gets there potentially because he does so many other times during that match.
Yeah, and it's not in the rules that just because the ball's not coming your way, you can rugby tackle someone. So I think, you know, Roy Hodgson's argument at the end was a little bit of a mute point, really, wasn't it?
No one asked for it. Oh well, you know, if a person gets murdered in the woods and no one's there to see it, does it not happen? Bloody hell.
You know,
that was an extreme example from Siobhan, to be fair to Roy.
I've got to say on Siobhan's comment before about the TV thing, I'm with you, by the way. I've come to realise over the years that commentators really do make things more dramatic and more nerve-wracking. And I realise that is the core purpose of their job. And well done on that. But I much prefer being in the ground, particularly when things are a little bit 50-50 in the game or a little bit unsettled.
I realised what it was yesterday because we were both sitting there going, this is unnecessary, this is ridiculous, we can't do this again. And it's because you can't see everyone else. You can't see where everyone else is and see, well, that's actually going to be dealt with by that person.
Yeah. In terms of edginess, though, it goes being in the ground, watching on telly, listening to it on the radio is absolutely fucking horrible.
In that scenario, just check out. And
just follow the score and then get back to it later.
I'm not going to come to you on this next question because what would be the point? I'll go to Stu first and foremost. Did you become more nervous as it wore on? Because I didn't really. Only when the VAR thing hit one way or the other did I feel like genuinely, oh God, I've got no real sense of firstly what's happening here. And then even when we won the pen, the thing that sort of occurred to me was if he misses the pen when no one knows what it's being given for and then they go up the other, like suddenly the power of narrative was on me. Up to that point, I just thought, we're just going to see, I'd like this not to be like this, but we're going to see it out. Or were you nervous on, say, 75, 80?
Yeah, I was, but I think that was self-imposed really because like my own internal narrative, and actually something a comment I'd made to the guy next to me during the game was, you know, it's still 1-0 on 80. It's going to be a nervy last 10. Yeah. And I forgot about that. And then I looked up at the clock, and it was all of a sudden it was 82. And I was like, oh my God, I'm suddenly really, really, really nervous.
I'm in my own nervy last 10.
Yeah, I'd set it my own narrative. Yeah, and you know that wasn't necessarily an indicator of how like Watford had us on the rack or anything like that. They didn't. But I think when you've got this much skin in the game at this end of the season, and you've just got to win, there's always a puncher's chance, isn't there? While it's 1-0. So because of that, and because of my own little self-created narrative, I was a wreck. I'm very relieved at the pen.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it came at the perfect time. I don't think the nervousness around it and the edginess was nothing to do with what was going on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? There's times where we're 1-0 up and you're thinking, fucking hell, we need another one here because this is looking edgy. But it wasn't that. It was just that everything is so kind of heavy with the weight of what is to come that's why you were feeling it, not because of what was going on.
They were disjointed, I thought, Siobhan, throughout. And that was one of the things that sort of irritated me more than made me nervous, was they just couldn't quite click. And they had the opportunity to click, I thought, first half. Just after they went 1-0 is when I think I sort of expected to see this performance coalesce into something that took the game away from Watford. And it just never quite comes, which is slightly credit to Watford, but I think Liverpool were just all a bit post-international break.
I think they were. I actually thought the first 5-10 minutes, I was expecting a bit of a battering, to be honest. Not because they created anything, but I just thought they were all really up for it. But then it petered out so quickly, and I think the goal was, well, as we know, it was a bit against the run of play because Watford had just had that chance. Was it a chance? Was it offside? I don't know. But it was very much needed, and it probably punctured them a little bit, but it didn't make us much better. You're right. And I do think that there was just a bit of a hangover, and I think everyone was doing just the bare minimum, and that's fine if there's absolutely nothing happening around you, if you haven't just nearly gone 1-0 down and things like that, if the game it wasn't on a knife edge, it didn't feel like that, but I got the sense that everyone was just doing everything they needed to win, and no more and no less.
It did very much have that vibe, Emilia. It's interesting, each of his subs, well, certainly the Fabinho sub is done to shore us up. Milner obviously is coming on at 1-0, again with an eye on shoring it up. I'd even argue to a sense Mane coming on because he's a bit more defensively responsible. Out of choice, I think, not out of the choice of the manager, I think, than Salah more than anything else. I felt everything that the manager was doing, it wasn't to make us more fluent in terms of being a well-oiled attacking machine. It was to just ensure we were going to see the game out.
No, absolutely, and that's all we needed to do. And, it's obviously an important fixture, and I think it was interesting when you were on the post-match show yesterday talking about it is the big fixture that we're all thinking about coming up is meaningless if yesterday isn't a big fixture. Do you know what I mean? If we lose it, then it means nothing. So it is big in that sense, but we all know it's not the one that that we're thinking about every second of every day. And I think sometimes it sounds like a criticism when we say Liverpool haven't really stepped it up a gear at any point in the match. But if they don't need to, then why would they? The point is that they've got gears. They're not having to give a fixture like that 100% at all times, and we can just get through it, take the 3 points, and then move on, especially after an international break, move on to the very big fixtures that are coming up.
I wondered is he picking for rhythm a little bit, Stu, from the outset of the game. He's got some of the players who haven't got away on international duty play, Gomez, Firmino and Thiago. Jones, I think, was the most interesting selection as the one that sort of came from left field, but he had played for England under 21s or 23s, whatever age it is these days. Also within there as well, you've got Elliot plays for the under 23s against Chelsea, which I think is really interesting, gets 45 minutes in there. Do you think he's got one eye on the idea of he just needs to get some people involved from the outset?
Yeah, very much so. I think it was selection wise, it was one of the most team selections that had to do with rotation, rest, and with an eye on what's to come. It was the most squad management team selection I've seen Klopp do for quite some time. And again, it's that idea of it's a game we've got to get through, it's a game we've got to win, but actually we've just got to do enough, and it's exactly what you were saying there, Emilia. You saw that within the game as well. There's that element of not trying to stretch themselves too much, not committing too much, and I think that was probably instruction. I would imagine. So there was certainly game management in the selection from the manager, but I think there was in-game management from the players and how much they exerted themselves.
I think around that, the Thiago Henderson and then later Fabinho access is really interesting because they are the footballers who you do trust, Stu, to do this we're managing ourselves through it thing more than any others. You felt they had gears to go to, all three of them in different ways, and they never quite chose to hit those gears.
No, that's right. I think I also think that there's a downside to that, isn't there? Because when you're not exerting yourself fully, some players might be able to stroll through a game really well, but for others it'll just knock them off their rhythm if they're not giving everything. And you saw quite a disjointed performance from many. I thought it was notable, wasn't it, though, that how good Thiago was, particularly in that first half, until I gave him the commentator's curse in the second half, where I was waxing lyrical about him and then watched him to proceed to have a head explosion for about 5 minutes where all he did was give the ball away. at one point desperately lunged to the touchline to
that
keep
one
the
was
ball
all
in
that was
and
mad. That he
set them
kicked to the
up.
other side of him.
Yeah.
It was really weird. It was a really weird thing to do in a football match.
I entirely blame myself. I feel I have far too much control over these proceedings. But yeah.
Around them trying to manage it, Emilia, I think it's interesting a couple little bits. The first is the managing it and it being disjointed. Jota's fascinating to me as a footballer, and when I watched it back rather than being the ground, I felt through the 90 live in the ground like I'd like a little bit more from Jota here. Watching it back, I actually think after he scores, he has a really good game.
Yeah.
But he almost has a lot of his good gameness almost happens independent of his teammates in a way which the rest of them are always really embedded. Jota's doing a lot of stuff that I really liked, but he's not. I don't even know. I can't quite work out whether he is on their wavelength because he wouldn't be able to score all the goals he scores if he wasn't. But there is a little bit of a thing where he is weirdly, despite so many of those forwards having such individual talent, he is the one who does appear to have the most sort of lone wolf thing going on at times.
Yeah. But then what's interesting about that is you see him linking up with players in a way where it's that kind of like that he knows the pass that's going to be made and where it's going to go before it happens, and it's maybe it's because there's not one specific player that he has that kind of link up with that it feels more like he's on his own, whereas there's other forwards where you go and they've got that kind of connection with one person where it's always to each other. But I think sorry, go on.
No, I'm about to say, I'll come back to you. I think that's a really interesting observation because I think, for instance, you're able to say, go back a couple of seasons, Robertson, Mane and Wijnaldum all have an understanding on the pitch. You're able to say, for instance, Salah and Henderson and Trent Alexander-Arnold have an understanding on the pitch. I wonder if it's because Jota's been moved around as much as he has. He's never quite been part of an axis in this Liverpool team.
Yeah, and he's been slotted into their position, so he's not been able, but then moved to other ones, so he's not been able to kind of establish that link up that they've had for over kind of a number of seasons. I think that when we say, interestingly, about other players that had a gear to step up into, I don't think Jota, you never get the sense that he's leaving anything in the tank, even though we've seen even better performances from him than we saw yesterday. You always get the sense that he's just going at everything, giving it 100%, and I think that's sometimes where he feels like he's a little bit on his own because he's trying to make it all happen for himself.
He's a bit of a maverick, isn't he? He's a funny player because I often think that I prefer to see him on the left, because when he's playing up front, I don't think he's involved in the game as much, but he's a great poacher. I mean, he's Fowler-esque in his poaching ability. It's unbelievable. But when he plays on the left, sometimes it feels like we don't have the right outlet. And yesterday for me was actually one of those times. I know there was a couple of moments where he had a couple of little cheeky runs where he was able to carry the ball into their half, but largely I feel that he can be a little bit of a passenger at times in the build-up play, and he's constantly looking to make a blindside run. And there was a lot of interesting switches yesterday with Firmino. There was really good movement between the two. But I think Liverpool's pattern of play over the last few years has been so entrenched in having these two pacey, dribbling wide players who are the outlets, we can release it to them. And I think sometimes he's not always in that position because he's looking to move on the inside maybe 5 yards earlier than Mane would have done, for example. So I do think there can be a knock-on effect, and particularly when on the other side, I think Mo Salah had a bit of a stinker yesterday. Yeah. We love the guy; he's an all-time great, but it wasn't his greatest game. So I think yesterday there was a little bit of a combination of those two things in the wide areas that were helping to stilt our play a little bit.
On Jota.
I actually, when you said about Fowler, I think that ability to be out of the game but never out of the game is such a striker's instinct. I know because he's played out wide so often, but you forget that he's probably just got that mentality of being on the end of absolutely everything. He's really enigmatic in that sense, and I do think that he can overplay when he's too involved in the build-up. He becomes too involved in the build-up and he overplays and he overthinks. But when he just puts himself in the right place in the right time, which is what he's done so many times. And yesterday on the telly, I can't despair enough about that commentary yesterday. He said, it's not a good ball unless there's someone there to receive it. Yes, but the same can be said of the exact reverse. It's not one without the other, and that's that. And that's a great ball and a fantastic instinct to get in the position to get that ball and to put it away. And I think that there's a sense of accepting those slight flaws. It's always when I find this a lot. Neil, you said before that Jota grew into the game once he'd scored. That happens a lot with him, and it's always the games where he's like not playing that well, where you think he's probably going to pop up and do something. Against, was it Arsenal the other week? He was not great.
About to be subbed, and still got subbed, but just managed to make a difference in that. In those few minutes in between, and I think he's just one of them. And how often have we probably called out for one of them?
He's such a throwback, I think. I mean, even his nickname of Jota the Slaughter and all this, it's this idea of if you like, the goal poacher from the 90s and before, you know what I mean? This whole idea of having someone who's just the fox in the box, if you like, and all that. He's more than
pulling out
that.
all the classic
but that, it is that
somehow.
but that's what it was when, you know, you're the archetypical centre forward, I suppose, of those throwback days was that kind of player, and we see less and less that now, and there's no denying he's an unbelievable finisher. You know, right foot, left foot, in the air. I mean, for a guy who's not particularly tall, he's unbelievable. His timing is incredible. So I can imagine he gives the manager a lot of problems in some respects, because he thinks, I've got to play this fella, because he scores goals. He does create things out of nothing. But he's such a maverick as well, and actually that has a knock-on impact, and you have to think about that with your rest of your team selection.
The Stu mentioned before, Emilia, about Salah. I'm going to do a little bit in a couple of instances of since Stamford Bridge. So since Stamford Bridge, he went away to the African Cup of Nations and he didn't come back looking quite the same player. It feels as though Egypt and the way they play has knocked his rhythm a little bit. He's only got 1 goal in open play from his last 8. Still calm the penalties. Still a massive threat. You get to see people be hugely concerned with him. But he has found himself, Emilia, just sort of, as I say, to me, just appears not to be anywhere near as fluent in his football as he was in October.
I think he's a player where, more so than anyone else on the pitch, you see him get in his own head, and you can see how it affects him on the pitch, but from game to game it almost seems to kind of compound and it becomes worse and worse, and I think a lot of it is related to the results that he gets from international duty, and I think that he comes back from it not only knackered physically because it's really hard work, but also mentally just absolutely done in. And I think I know it sounds daft, but like, he's a player who needs to win. Like, he finds that like it's the thing that spurs him on more than anything else, is like the glory around it and being the person at the centre of that. And I think that without it, I don't know, it just feels like he's had the wind knocked out of his sails quite a bit recently.
I think you still get to see Stu loads of, like, he's such a threat. He works so hard. He's determined. He's obviously still absolutely incredible at football. That hasn't gone anywhere. But the reason why I mentioned the Stamford Bridge thing is he scores that goal at Stamford Bridge where he just makes a fool. He runs off the back of Rudiger. He destroys Alonso. He knocks past their excellent keeper with aplomb. You know, that's a pure Mo Salah goal. And that stuff, listen, that's the stuff of the gods. That's the stuff of being the best. And that's my point, really, is that it isn't that he isn't still quite clearly one of the best, but he hasn't quite found his moments. He gets through one-on-one against Chelsea in the League Cup final. He doesn't finish. You know, you just a few little bits of this, and I genuinely do feel it is since he went away to the African Cup of Nations. I really do feel that is a thing here, and I think it might have been compounded by what's just happened. I don't think he enjoys the Egyptian experience, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about it. It broke it, you know, to use the Klopp term, it broke his rhythm, didn't it, when he went to the AFCON? And I think he's an interesting player, Mo, because and you don't often get this with wide players, but he's not really a wide player, is he? You know, he's the most centre forward wide player you've ever seen in your life, and you know, you would again going back a little bit. Michael Owen, for example, I mean, the chalk and cheese in terms of ability, I would say, but Michael Owen was one of those players who would hit a hot streak, and then when he wouldn't, you know, he could go 10 games without a goal. Now, Mo Salah hasn't quite done that, but I think when you look at Mo Salah's career, he has hot streaks, and those hot streaks can last an entire season. They can be unbelievable, but I think there's also a human being in there, like, you know, and I think there's a guy who is he's judging himself on the harshest criteria. And I think that because his ambitions are there, both for his teammates and for himself.
He wants to be the best footballer in the world.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if he's not, if he's not representing himself in the best possible way on the pitch, then I think he can get in his own head a little bit and perhaps overthink things. I think yesterday there were so many times that, and whether you give credit to Watford this, I'm not sure, but there were so many times when he'd received the ball on the corner of the penalty area, and he'd cut inside and try to beat what felt like about 6 men, and repeatedly would run into trouble. He might get past the first 1 or 2, and don't forget, against Watford, I think it was Watford, wasn't it, away from home, where he did it and lashed it in the bottom corner. So he knows he's got that in his locker, but I just think, you know, psychologically, like all of the greats, or most of the great strikers of all time, a goal will change them. A goal will change them, and I'm convinced I'm convinced that a goal will change things against Benfica on Tuesday for him.
Thought he was going to say City then.
I was going to say bold.
No, but see what my argument there is, if he gets the goal against Benfica,
then he has the best.
He's
game
ready
of the
for
time.
City.
Yeah.
Do you know what I think doesn't help? Is the way this best footballer in the world has become a fluid situation of the best footballer in the world right now.
Yeah.
But it can change. I think that doesn't help in the slightest, because I think for so long it's been a fairly binary issue. Messi or Ronaldo, Messi or Ronaldo, Messi or Ronaldo. And now, because they're kind of, their star has faded, it's like the best of the rest, it seems to be. And I don't think that helps him, because he probably feels like he's on the back foot all the time. Whereas Messi went away with international duty and did nothing with Argentina for so long. But yet he was still the best in the world. And I just don't think carrying the weight, because he's a hero in Egypt, isn't he? I don't think carrying that weight whilst it's such a fluid, changeable situation.
And while he hasn't got as many teammates who are as good as him.
Exactly. And this is my next point. In that when he plays for Liverpool, he can have a bad game, but it's fine because someone else is going to have a brilliant game. He didn't outshine anyone else at AFCON, really, apart from penalty shootouts. He's not had that moment just yet with them of recent. But he hasn't got the backup and the talent behind him, has he? So he's working an awful lot harder for little gain, whereas when he works really hard for Liverpool, it's absolutely fine because everyone else is also working really hard and can match him for it. But I just don't think this right now, best player in the world right now, is helping anyone.
The idea I said before about it becoming increasingly fluid, Stu, as it wears on, there's a couple of things. I think firstly the back four play really well as a unit defensively through the course of the game. The keeper himself is remarkably good. All the time, remarkably good. And then Fabinho comes on, and then you've got Henderson and Thiago. And I think this is one of the reasons why, and one of the things that I think Klopp will be looking to do in certain league games between now and the end of the campaign, if we do remain in everything, is being able to say the bedrock of all of this is in place. So the other stuff, we can be a bit patient for it if we need to be. We don't need to force the issue because we've got the bedrock of all of this, and it's such a luxury to have at the minute. Yeah,
we do have such solid foundations, don't we, really? I think the goalkeeper's just... I don't think his saves actually... I don't think they enough quantify his value to the team. It's beyond his saves. It's his charisma. It's his presence. It's his calming, imposing figure that he has over his own teammates, but also the opposition. I mean, can you imagine going one-on-one against him? Can you imagine it? I mean, it'd be terrifying to try and pick a space past him. He's just a bird of a man, and to have that, and for him to be so cool and calm about it as well. And then you look in front of him, and the defenders that we're talking about, they're not greats of the Premier League. We're talking all-time Liverpool greats. And I'm so pleased that finally this year Matip is getting the credit that he deserves. People are realising that actually this guy's not just Van Dijk's sidekick. This guy is an unbelievable player in his own right. It was lovely to see Gomez back yesterday, and I think he did a cracking job on the right hand side. I was really pleased as well. There was a couple of moments where it didn't quite come off him. He lost the ball a little bit, and they went through. And I think if on either of those occasions, and they may well have been at least one of them offside, but on either occasions that had led to a goal, I think that would have been soul destroying for him, really, and knocked him back, because and his performance deserved much more than that. But actually, the standout for me yesterday was Robertson in the back four. I just think that we can take him for granted at times, not just as a player but as a warrior on that pitch. I mean, there was one point in the second half, just you and I were both in the Anfield Road then, Neil, weren't we? And just in front of us on the left hand side near the end of the game, and Watford were trying to turn the screw a little bit. They were trying to put a bit of pressure on us, and Andy Robertson threw in a tackle that was the most needed. It was a Milner-esque tackle. It was like, let's just put an end to this nonsense now. I'm going to clean you out and put you all back in your place. And the crowd loved it. It got everyone up. It was a captain's tackle in that kind of moment, really. And I think when you talk about these players, you listed 4 or 5 players there in various positions, from goalkeeper to defensive midfield. We are so blessed with so many leaders. These are real captains.
I think that's why, again, I'll say it again, I think that's why he feels that he can he can rely on them. And I think the other thing that I think Gomez is really interesting, because you got the impression in the way the manager spoke about him afterwards, he's told him just to back himself, and you got to see a little bit of that. And for me, it's the best thing you can do in these scenarios. Was he said to Gomez, don't try and be Trent Alexander-Arnold, be the best Joe Gomez.
But then equally, they said it on the commentary, and it was completely true. If you closed your eyes for that pass to Jota for the goal, it's a Trent Alexander-Arnold all day, every day.
Close your eyes, you can't see it, Emilia.
No, but I just that's the thing. There's no point trying to be Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he's very, very good at being Joe Gomez, and I think that was an important fixture for him, because Trent is already back on the bench. Do you know what I mean? I think he's the question mark of whether he'd be back in time for City. I don't think he'll be back for Benfica, absolutely, if not starting and coming off the bench. And I think for Joe Gomez to not only have been on the pitch for that, but to have played an important role, even though it wasn't a perfect performance, to have played an important role, hopefully leads to him backing himself a bit more, because he hasn't had the opportunity to do that. And like, you could see how made up they all were for him, that he plays that role in the goal, because they all want that for him. And it must be that thing, not just from Klopp, but from the entire squad, to be like, back yourself, mate, because you should.
There was no evidence of him not backing himself yesterday, in my opinion.
No, not whatsoever.
I actually really loved that he got booked as well. Just because it was just like he wasn't being careful. He wasn't, watching his step. I thought he was like just right back where he thinks he should be, and I think it was a bit of a statement, and I think it was probably a bit of a message to the manager.
Well, I think what it does, Stu, is it opens up a position for him to get a lot of games between now and the end of the campaign, a lot of appearances, because there's, we don't want to be in a position where you've got to completely rely on Arnold for every single game on the one hand. On the other hand, there may well be an injury to either of any of the other three centre-backs. And I think that what you can take away from yesterday is it's very easy to imagine, if Liverpool go all the way in all these competitions, I think it's 15 games in total from this point. If they were to go all the way in all those competitions, it's very easy to imagine Gomez getting 11 appearances over the course of that game, and maybe 4 or 5 of them being starts.
Definitely. I mean, when he throws in performances like that, I thought he was great on the ball yesterday. Exactly what you said about backing himself. In those wide areas, you wouldn't think he was a centre-half. He was brilliant on the balls, little body swerves, little drag backs to be able to beat players in confined spaces. Really, really, really good. And absolutely, I think at this point in time, even if we had a squad right now that had a full, clean bill of health, you'd still say, well, we haven't got into April and May yet in a season where they're going to arguably play more games than they've ever had to do. Yeah. So there's going to be wear and tear. There's going to be the need for rotation beyond the centre-half position. We don't really have we haven't really had a real good viable option to rest Trent, and we need to protect Trent. We need to make sure that in the same way that we try and find moments to rest the Salah, or we try and rest the Thiago, we need to try and find those moments to rest Trent, because he is our best playmaker. So, absolutely think there's a pathway for games for Joe Gomez, particularly with performances like that yesterday.
And particularly with 5 subs in these competitions as well.
I'd start him, by the way.
On Benfica.
I would start him, yeah. I'd bring Trent on. I'd let Trent get 20 or 30 minutes in prep for the weekend. But everything I saw of Gomez there yesterday, I thought, no, away from home, Europe, sound, start him.
Line chat then. Match today focused on 2 Watford chances that were almost certainly offside. Both of them counted in all XG studies that I saw, because no flag goes up and no foul is given. Honestly, trust me, this is a controversial issue in the stats community. They are trying to work out what to do about this sort of stuff.
When's the emergency meeting?
Honestly, have
you got your cake?
It's a very exact date. It is a difficult thing, because I want to go through all of this really. There's the line. It's fascinating to me, this, because there's so many human interactions around sort of decisions. Liverpool have only conceded 6 in all comps since Stamford Bridge. Since the 2-2 at Stamford Bridge, I'm not counting those 2 goals. They've only conceded 6 goals in all competitions. That includes the FA Cup, it includes the League Cup, and it includes, obviously, the Champions League and Premier League. It's not to say that Liverpool won't be punished at some point, but the idea they've only conceded 6 in all competitions since Stamford Bridge suggests something's working, Emilia. And for me, the psychology of all this, both the way in which it's covered and discussed by humans, is really interesting, because I think in the past, there wasn't the video assistant referee, the thing about offside, all the other video assistant referee stuff is it's at least got the notion that there is something in there where there's still another human decision that needs to be made. There's still another bit of sort of subjectivity. Whereas the way the offsides are done is there's no subjectivity. It is objective. They do the lines, and if the lines tell you this, then it's offside. And for me, I'm really interested, because in a normal situation, I think at some point a linesman decides whether in one game or whether watching Liverpool over a number of games, because linesmen are people too, in the same way that people who cover football are, they go, well, they can't all all be off.
Yeah.
And I think that there's this really interesting thing that I think Liverpool have made a big group decision that they will just trust the back themselves and the back the digital nature of the VAR on these offsides and say, we will get these right because we've taken it out of all human hands apart from our own.
But I think that's the point, is that the Liverpool backing themselves is that you can't do it if you're not as good as Liverpool. It's not a decision that you can make if you don't have our back four, any of our back four there, so that if the decision goes against you, you back yourself to be able to get back and to do that. So I think you can only play a line like that if you know that you've got the quality of a squad that we have, and if you know that if the decision doesn't go your way, it will still be absolutely fine anyway. Is it just because we obviously watch our own games and analyse the stats for us, but it doesn't feel like it's as much of a thing that's as commented on with any other squad as it is for Liverpool.
But no one else catches anywhere near as many people offside as Liverpool do. Nowhere near as many. Like Liverpool's offside numbers are absolutely battered everybody else's by a factor of 3 or 4. It's not some sort of small amount, and that's at some point the reason why it's important to talk about it in all competitions, I think, Siobhan, is the side that's come closest to hurting us is the best side we played in that run, which is Chelsea. And in the League Cup final, they miss a couple of chances, and they also nearly catch the line when they don't miss the chances on a couple of occasions, but we do get the players offside. But they do nearly manage to take advantage of it, and that's where this is where those high stakes is going to be really interesting coming into not just the game against City, but the games that could come after Benfica if we get through against Bayern Munich, other big matches. It's one thing doing this against Watford and Burnley, is my point. It's another thing entirely doing it against the very best in the world.
Oh, absolutely, because as Emilia's just said, you're relying very much on your personnel to be able to make that happen. And when you come up against people who've also got said personnel or comparable personnel, then that's going to be easier for them to do. But it's also not something that can be switched on overnight or switched. You can't play in the league against a team who don't do it and then all of a sudden switch it on to defend against that, because we grew into it ourselves. I remember early in the season, everyone was criticising Robertson for being the last man who was playing someone on at all times. So it's not as if they've just gone, oh, well, hang on a minute, the rules have changed, so why don't we just all wait for that? They've grew into it and they've gone, hang on a minute, these do go in our favour when they happen, so we need to make sure to work hard to do it. And I just think that isn't as Chelsea are cute. They're winners in that sense, in that they are bad timing to be saying that, but that's why finals and semi-finals suit them down to the ground, because they can go, what are we doing for this match, what are we doing for this very match? And I guess every game is to go to the Stu Wright school of cliches, every game's a cup final from now on, and people can treat playing Liverpool as how do we play against Liverpool, not how do we play.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because the City, I mean, Benfica will be a tough game, but we all know what the big game is that's on the horizon, Stu. And if we can see it, and I think we're right. I think I'm right, by the way. I'm backing myself on this one about the idea that Liverpool have chosen a lot of stuff.
Does the stats community agree?
Yeah, well, there's mixed views on that as well. There is this thing, I think, where for me the match of the day stuff, it's almost a bit of a distraction, but it's a really human reaction. Pep Guardiola will not have a human reaction. It won't be Liverpool are vulnerable to this. If his attitude will be Liverpool are absolutely brilliant at this, but. And I think that's something that's quite different. It's not the idea of, well, if we all get a bit lucky, we can manipulate this. Guardiola will be going into that game next Sunday going, right, they're amazing at this. However, if we do this, and this, we could just pick our moments in the same way the Tuchel sorted that out with Chelsea when we play the League Cup final.
Yeah, sure. He'll definitely be trying to come up with a strategy that'll to exploit it. But the thing is, it's a lot harder done than said, isn't it, really? And I think that the world... I want to say the football world, if you like, in this country is enamoured with Guardiola, and the narrative of what he has brought to the Premier League tends to swamp everything else, really. But I actually think that leads to people overlooking something that Klopp has brought into the game. The very fact that we are, as you said, Neil, 3-4 times. As many offsides, we're catching people out than anyone else in the league. It is ridiculous. It is Saki-esque. It is the kind of, it's decades after Saki's Milan, and people still talk about that. People still study that team and how they did it. Klopp being one. And I actually think that in years to come, it would be remiss if the narrative is still just about what Pep's brought to the game, because if Liverpool go on and do what they potentially could do here, that's one of the main reasons why. Because keeping those shutouts week in, week out, killing off any hope of a team breaking our offside trap, I think it's got to grind the opposition down. But it's certainly been a pathway for us to nick games 1-0 when we're struggling in games, when we just need to get through a game. We know that no one's letting one in the other end, because an unbelievably sophisticated system that relies on such intense levels of movement, awareness and communication. You see the level of communication between Van Dijk and Matip. It's unreal. It's unreal. And when Van Dijk, I suppose you can see it more when he's playing with Canate, actually, because he's shepherding him a little bit more. And you can see the hand signals, you can see the shouts, you can see the little very, very subtle looks that Van Dijk will give Canate at a moment's notice for him to then make a step forward. It's so sophisticated. And I think it really needs historically to be celebrated if Liverpool go on to do what they could do.
The individual players and the way in which they interact with each other, I think you get to see it in other little areas. There's something really interesting I think we're doing with set pieces at the moment, Siobhan, which is often when the first phase of the set piece breaks down, what doesn't happen is the two centre-halves rush back. They tend to take a minute to assess the situation. I'm convinced Van Dijk calls it, by the way. Then what happens is I think Van Dijk then calls it and Joel begins to go back. And I think sometimes Virg thinks, no, I'm going to give this another couple of seconds and just see if something else comes here. And that's one of the reasons why Liverpool have been really good at creating opportunities within 10 seconds of set pieces and not from the immediate set piece. And then sometimes Virgil might then hang up for a little bit longer. He was almost annoyed during a period yesterday that it hadn't actually broken back to him. He was like, do a stay, do a go. He's already sent Joel back. And to me, this is about sort of the manager educating these players, trusting these players, but these players being such clever footballers, and I think you see the same thing with the offsides.
This sort of thing you don't see on the telly, isn't it? So I think that it's something that they've worked out within games. On the set pieces thing, I'm always dead surprised to hear that we're really good at set pieces, because I think it just must be a technically a really low bar in that not many goals come
every
from
team every team in the country thinks they should be scoring more from the corners.
Exactly.
Everyone does.
It always, I mean, like, I know again, talking of human reactions, if very much is one, but everyone cheers as if we've just scored when we get a corner, and I'm just like, nothing is going to happen. As you said, something might happen and something might happen after that. And, you know, we often talk about the pass before the pass before the pass. The corner might just be the pass before the pass, and and everyone knows where it's going to go. So, you know, it's certainly not an observation I've noticed, but Neil, I'm not you. I might have been in the chair before, but I'm not you. But yeah, I think trusting players and trusting them to have their own instincts on the field and to make decisions that, you know, that feel right. That's why you have a captain. That's why we've got a team of international captains, is because they're trusted elsewhere to go and do it, so they can be trusted here to do it too.
Absolutely. 3 points with the aim, and it was done. City cruised to victory against Burnley, which is what you could broadly speaking expect. It was a week for just getting jobs done. City, a couple of goals early, obviously no anxiety, but they get themselves the same victory as Liverpool. Download the app, theanfieldwrap.com. Do check out the app there. Use the tokens, get into everything before the Benfica game, after the Benfica game, before the City game, and then after the City game, which should be the absolute business. It'll be a great game of football, I'll tell you that much. Overnight, there was Salah contract reports, Emilia. It all feels sensible that this gets resolved, but I mean, genuinely, who knows? And it feels as though there might have been some brinkmanship all round.
There was a very interesting second qualifying par in that story, I'd say. I don't doubt it. I'm just saying it was a very good mirror move of here's a really bold first par, and then a second reports that potentially maybe someone has said to someone, a source that can't be named, and perhaps someone said maybe this might happen. It was just I don't doubt that it will. I got incredibly excited when I got the push notification, opened it like it was Christmas morning, and there was like a Stretch Armstrong under the tree, and then was like, oh, okay. It made it sound more like it was a done deal, and I'm sure it will be. It's a great thing. I, like John Gibbons, relish the prospect of Mo Salah playing up front for Liverpool when he's 70 years old, as I'm sure does Mo Salah, because he's a man who just doesn't like to go home. He likes to play every single game. What was the question? Sorry.
The question was just I feel the whole thing has been a bit of brinkmanship all around, and I think at some point, I think actually all parties will actually may well come back a little bit from the brink on this, because I think everyone can maybe just see where the bread's buttered.
Yeah, completely. And he's been very clear about what he wants and what he likes, and that he'd like to still be here. So I think we all know the result that will happen. There's just been some edginess about whether or not it will.
Has anyone seen the film The Breakup with Jennifer Aniston?
I have, and
Vince Vaughn.
Yeah.
Neither of them want to split up with the other.
Yeah.
And it goes too far.
Yeah.
And they end up splitting up.
Yeah.
And it all works out in the end, but it should have never happened in the first place. Yeah. That's what could have happened here, or
and
could still happen here.
Here.
I think that everyone, we've all had those arguments at home, haven't we, where you're like, it's over, this is
Is Julia Moore,
like,
just out for my own interest, is
here.
Julia Moore Vince Vaughn, or is he Jennifer Aniston in this metaphor? And which one's Mo Salah? It's Julia Moore on you, sort of. Yeah. Is he Vince Vaughn or Jennifer Aniston in this metaphor? And which one's Mo?
I think Jennifer Aniston and Vince Vaughn are totally interchangeable in this situation
Yeah,
because
okay.
they're both knobheads to each other, but neither of them want to split up. So I think that this has gone much longer than I thought it was going to go.
It's a really
I
great
just think
analogy.
it's a really good analogy because, like, you know, it's that way of brinkmanship, isn't it? Like, you can take something as far as you want, and it only takes it wouldn't take much for everyone to just go, fuck this, it's not happening. Whereas what happens is, potentially it happens, maybe potentially someone says it happens, is that they've all gone, hang on a sec, come on. I did find the narrative of, or the choice of words of, for the rest of his career, interesting.
I was surprised.
So this is the Gutman theory. The Gutman theory is that the way Liverpool circumnavigate the issue around paying Mo substantially more than everyone else is that they give him a longer term deal. So it's less money, but it's more guaranteed money until the age of 35 or even 36. So he ends up still being Liverpool's top earner, but the contract is stretched out even further. But he's not Liverpool's top earner by an unbelievable amount. He's Liverpool's top earner by a little bit less. So you can keep the wage structure in place, but you're guaranteeing him that money until he's 36, Stu. And that's why I thought that language was interesting as well. That Liverpool's move might be to move this from a 4-year deal to a 5 or even a 6-year deal, as if to say, right, this is it now. You're here. We'll accept that we're paying you this much for this length of time.
It's interesting though, because in the article it says that the end of the career, but then it followed up with it's a 3-year contract with an option of an extension to make it 4, which then puts all the question marks in place of how is that the end of his career. It's certainly not what Mo Salah is going to anticipate is the end of his career. I don't know. I think ultimately it has to come to a sensible conclusion. It's the only sensible and logical conclusion has to be Mo Salah staying at Liverpool. He's not going to be doing himself any justice going anywhere else, I don't believe. And yeah, that's why I've generally stayed fairly cool about this all the way through, because it would just be, to me, it would just be preposterous. It would just be a ludicrous decision on his behalf. I really liked your analogy before.
Thanks.
Really liked it. The more I thought about it, And in this, I'm actually thinking...
It's flawed.
It's flawed. All the characters are horrible.
As a piece of cinema, I'm saying it's flawed. Well, that's not why it's flawed, but it is as a piece of cinema, I think it's flawed. But anyway, go on.
All right, Neil.
Yeah, so I just think it has to come to a natural conclusion, and I actually do think that will be pretty soon. I just feel that there is a sense, and I was saying this a couple of weeks ago to friends in a WhatsApp group, that you just had a sense that over the next month or so, I could see this coming to a conclusion. There'd be signs, there'd be the end of the brinksmanship. So yeah, I'm fully on board. I'm fully expecting him to sign, and whether it be timely announcement before the City game or whether it be just left until the end of the season, neither would really surprise me.
But who does that benefit, the timely announcement before the City game? Does it change? I saw a conversation around that last night. What does it?
I don't think it necessarily needs to be announced. I think though, if it's agreed and he just knows,
it might be freeing for him mentally, and I think he might actually quite need that at the moment.
But I feel like
discussions before.
Yeah. If it's that close, he probably knows that by now, doesn't he? So I don't know.
You'd have thought.
I'm being pessimistic.
You would have thought so. Benfica away then. Wowza! They lost Friday. Like Jennifer Aniston. No, they lost Friday, but very little to play for domestically. They could have done without losing to Braga, because Braga are 4th, they are 3rd, but they still remain a huge number of points clear of Braga. They can't win the league at this point because Porto, who Liverpool beat twice, are far and away the best team in Portugal. They've got to be respected for getting near Emilia. Everyone has a puncher's chance, as Ajax discovered, against Benfica over 2 legs. It can still be a puncher's chance over 2 legs. Liverpool will be very, very respectful. Obviously, they know what's on the line here. They know how it works. We've just had a bit of a chasing experience against Watford, 5-0 at their gaff earlier in the season. It becomes a little bit of a sticky 2-0 in that one. The point, though, is we are going into this thinking Liverpool should get through, and it is reasonable to think that.
Yeah, no, it's the outcome that we all wanted. Not the outcome, sorry, but like the fixture that we all wanted it to be, because it's the one that we can feel the most confident about. Before the draw, I think it was Josh Sexton and I and other people on Wildcards talking about what your ideal kind of outcome was from the draw, and the discussion was around, do you want the shithouse route to the final, or you probably face City, or do you want to face City straight away and then shithouse your way to the final? It's difficult. I mean, there is no shithouse route, it's going to be difficult, but the one where you kind of go, we're relatively confident kind of in all rationality and reason that this will be fine. I think that sometimes there's not so much like scope for complacency, but because it feels a bit like our competition sometimes, that Liverpool somehow have an ownership over it and have this kind of all these amazing stories in Europe that it almost feels like this is ours to lose, and you can't go into a competition like that feeling that way. But yeah, I think we can all be relatively calm and happy.
Relatively calm and happy, Stu. As I say, they've got a lad up front who everyone's talking about, Darwin Núñez, linked with a lot of clubs around Europe. The other part of this, and the thing that you do need to be wary of in these fixtures, is the idea for a lot of these players, this is their opportunity to impress against Liverpool. It isn't just the idea of getting Benfica through. They'll want that as well. But it is the idea of, can I put my performance on in the bigger stage? Everyone's watching, and then from there, my career gets a springboard.
Yeah, that's 100% right. You know, this is, if you like, almost like a showpiece final for them to be able to show what they can do to the wider audience and get their big move. It's interesting because I've seen a lot of talk about Liverpool looking to almost kill the job over in Portugal, and I don't think that's what they'll do. In fact, I don't think that's what Liverpool will do week in, week out now for the rest of the season. I think Liverpool will do enough. My expectation is in these types of games, Liverpool will try and get a goal or two ahead, and then if the opportunity presents themselves to them.
So this is, I think, I agree with you on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you are Benfica and you are 2-0 down at the hour mark and you're going to have to go to Anfield, you surely do have to commit bodies.
And that's when the opportunity presents itself. And I think Liverpool will get themselves into a position where they can just, coast through games 1 or 2-0. But then actually, if the opposition start coming at them and the gaps start appearing, Liverpool have got the players to then just go and exploit that and finish the job. So I don't, what I'm getting at there is, I don't think you'll see at any point Liverpool trying to force the issue. And I think that's probably the sensible play now over the next few weeks, except for at the weekend, because I think at the weekend we should go there and we should try and force the issue. I think we should take the initiative and grab that game by the scruff of the neck and impose our will. You see, I'm firing already for this.
Excellent stuff. Who do you think's going to play, Siobhan?
I think that, as discussed earlier, I think Gomez has definitely got a shout to carry on, pick up where he left off. I think that there might be a shout for Canate instead of Matip with the weekend in mind, and then beyond that, the back five is the same, apart from those two changes I've just made.
And for being you probably holding midfield.
Yeah, and I think that does Thiago coming off early probably predict that he's going to play?
Wasn't that early though. It was about 88.
Was it?
Yeah, it was after the penalty. Because Milner was stood there for ages waiting to get on. There was a point where
they were saying that he'd come on 2 minutes earlier. Obviously, we didn't want to take it.
3 Watford players were stood there for ages waiting to come on.
Yeah, that was a good
7 minutes. 7 or 8 minutes. It's terrible for them. There was about 3 or 4 minutes of Milner stood there waiting to come on in the penalty.
I thought he'd come off earlier. In that case, maybe dismiss my early answer. I think Fabinho comes back. I think that him getting a little break was probably with this and Sunday in mind, straight after each other. Who's left?
He could play right hand side. He could play. I think he might start with Fabinho, Thiago, and Henderson off the basis of that he's got 5 subs. So it might well be that we do this and then we can remove them, and then from there it's what he does up front. Salah presumably starts. I think it'd be Salah, Mane, and Diaz.
I was going to say I'd really like to see Diaz, particularly with him not starting or not featuring at Watford. And I think in Europe he's probably got more gears than the rest to go up in and show.
And he's played these before.
And he's played them before, yeah, exactly. And I just think it's going to be a perfect one for him to shine. While I don't think that'll be the game plan, I could really do without a game with a load of jeopardy in a couple of weeks' time. Really do without that.
No jeopardy. Do you think that'll be the team broadly?
Broadly.
I think if Keita was fit, he might start Keita.
Yeah, that's. I don't think the manager wants to start Thiago in this game. I think he wants to leave him for the weekend and maybe have him as a bench option for Benfica. I wouldn't be surprised to see Milner get a shout, actually. I really wouldn't be surprised at that in the absence of Keita. I definitely think there's a as I mentioned before, a good shout for Gomez, and let Trent have half an hour, and I do think Canate will play. Front 3, I think, will be, as you said, I think it will be Diaz, Mane and Mo.
Okay.
Where is Keita up to?
He just didn't train. He hadn't trained on Thursday or Friday.
But he didn't in the post match. He didn't get mentioned when Klopp was asked about any concerns. He said no concerns.
There was good news for them both, for Trent and for Keita. It was just looking dead positive, I think.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. We'll end on that positive note. Marvellous. Thank you very much to Emilia, Bona, to Siobhan Biggane, and to Stu Wright. It's been the Anfield Wrap this week. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get harder than Watford. It's going to get tenser. But you wouldn't want it any other way.